Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a really fascinating chapter today, Ezekiel chapter 46.
Hmm.
This text, it lays out an incredibly detailed blueprint for a visionary temple. We're focusing on access, rituals, offerings, and even the role of this figure they call the prince.
Yeah, and it's more than just description, you know? It's really a set of regulations. It reveals this highly ordered system for worship, community life, all within the sacred space.
Right.
It emphasizes specific actions, timing, designated roles, very structured.
It's such a unique glimpse into a world governed by, well, precise rules. Shows a profound concern for order, for holiness. Let's jump right into maybe the most striking bit about access, the inner court's east gate.
Yes, that east gate, it's absolutely central to the whole system described here. And the text is very clear. It is to be shut on the 6 working days of the week.
Shut tight, so no using it on a typical day.
Yeah.
But that changes, doesn't it, on special occasions?
Just like that same east gate, it's open specifically on the Sabbath day and also on the day of the new moon. It really highlights these days as distinct, set apart from the ordinary run of the week.
So this prominent entry point to the inner court, it's deliberately restricted most of the time, only becoming accessible on these key worship days.
Mm-hmm.
What does that restriction and then the specific opening tell us? About the gate, or maybe about these days?
Well, it seems access to the, let's say, deeper parts of the sacred space through this particular gate is really tied to divine appointment.
Mm-hmm.
The rhythm of access isn't about convenience, it's dictated by the worship calendar. The everyday is sort of kept separate from the holy days.
And there's a figure who plays a really special role in the ritual involving this gate.
Mm-hmm.
The prince. How does he fit in with this rule?
Right. On those days, the east gate is open, the Sabbath, and new moon, the prince, has this unique prescribed ritual. He doesn't just wander in with everyone else.
Okay.
He enters from the outside, specifically through the portico of the gateway.
The covered entrance area, right?
Exactly. And then instead of just walking through, he stands, and the text is specific, by the gatepost.
Huh. A very specific spot within the gateway structure itself.
Precisely. And his act of worship, his bowing down, it happens right there at the threshold of the gateway.
Standing by the post, worshiping at the threshold. It sounds very deliberate, almost performative in a way.
Mm.
And while he's there, the priests are doing something for him.
Yes, the priests are the ones designated to sacrifice his burnt offering and his fellowship offerings for him during this ritual.
Okay, so he takes this specific position. His offerings are made for him. And then what happens?
Then he goes out. But here's an interesting detail about the gate itself. On these special days, Sabbath and new moon, the gate that was open for him doesn't just slam shut after he leaves.
Ah,
It actually stays open until the evening.
that makes sense. So his entry sort of signals the start of the day's access, and it stays open, presumably so others can also engage with the sacred space on these important days.
Exactly. And the text confirms this a bit later. It says the people of the land are also supposed to worship in the Lord's presence, and they do it right there at the entrance to that same east gateway on Sabbaths and new moons.
So the prince's ritual kind of kicks things off, or at least precedes the time for everyone else to worship at that specific important entrance.
Yeah.
It's a structured opening for worship.
It really is. And the text, it goes into incredibly precise details about the offerings themselves, especially the ones provided by or for the prince on these days.
Okay, let's get into those numbers.
Yeah.
What exactly does the prince bring on the Sabbath?
On the Sabbath, his burnt offering is 6 male lambs and 1 ram. And there's a key qualifier added. They must all be without defect.
Without defect, yeah, that's a common requirement, isn't it? For ritual purity, quality. And the new moon offering is slightly different.
It is, yes. On the day of the new moon, the burnt offering is a young bull, 6 lambs, and a ram. Again, all without defect.
So a bull is added or replaces something compared to the Sabbath.
Right. The bull replaces one of the animals, it seems.
It feels like the new moon might have a slightly maybe heavier or different kind of animal offering than the Sabbath. What about the grain offerings that go with these sacrifices?
Yeah, grain offerings are standard alongside burnt offerings here. For the ram, on both Sabbath and new moon, the grain offering is 1 ephah. And with the bull on the new moon, it's also 1 ephah.
1 ephah.
Yeah.
That's a specific dry measure, right? A fairly substantial amount,
Yeah.
maybe like a bushel, roughly. But I remember reading something interesting about the grain offering for the lambs.
Ah, yes. This is quite unique. With the lambs, on both days, the amount of grain offering isn't fixed like it is for the ram or the bull.
Right.
It's specified as as much as he pleases, or sometimes translated as much as he wants to give.
Left up to the prince's discretion. That feels very different from all the meticulous measuring elsewhere. What might that suggest, you think?
Well, it introduces an element of personal generosity, perhaps, or willingness into the required ritual. While the ram and bull offerings have set amounts, the lamb offerings allow for this variable contribution from the prince, maybe signifying his personal devotion or the resources he has.
Interesting.
And with each ephah of grain offering, a hin of oil is also required.
A hin. That's a liquid measure. Something like a gallon.
Roughly, yes. A hin of oil per ephah of grain.
So specific fixed amounts for the bigger animals, but flexibility for the lambs, plus a set amount of oil per grain measure. It's a very detailed system.
It absolutely is. And like we mentioned, the people's access for worship on these Sabbaths and new moons is tied right into this. When that east gate is open, they come before the Lord and worship at the entrance to that gateway.
So their communal worship happens right there at that open sacred threshold after the prince's initial ritual. It clearly links the gate opening to the community's ability to gather and worship.
Definitely. Now, the rules for the other appointed feasts or festivals, they introduce a completely different dynamic for how people move around.
Yeah, this is a really intriguing rule. When people come for the appointed feasts, they don't seem to use the east gate in the same way, and their movement through the temple area is highly regulated.
That's right. If they enter by the north gate to worship, the rule is they must go out the south gate.
And the other way around, too. South entry means north exit.
Exactly. If they enter through the south, they have to exit through the north.
And the text is pretty blunt about it, isn't it?
Yes, it explicitly says, no one is to return through the gate by which they entered. You have to exit through the opposite gate.
Now that strikes me, maybe it's just practical, for managing large crowds expected on festivals, ensuring a kind of one-way flow through the temple grounds.
That's certainly a likely practical reason. Prevents congestion at the gates.
But could there be a symbolic reason, too? Why make sure they don't leave the same way they came in? What does that emphasize?
It's possible. Symbolically, it could represent maybe a transformation, or the completion of the ritual experience you enter. You participate in the sacred encounter, and you depart. Changed, perhaps? Or having completed a full circuit, so you don't just retrace your steps. It emphasizes moving through the sacred space, not just in and out.
That makes a lot of sense. You've had your encounter, your departure is distinct from your arrival.
Sure.
Okay, so where's the prince during these busy festivals? Is he still doing his own thing at the East Gate?
No, this is different. The text specifies that during these appointed feasts, the prince is to be among the people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he goes in when they go in and goes out when they go out.
That's a significant contrast, isn't it? Compared to his unique ritual role at the East Gate on Sabbaths and new moons. During the major festivals, he seems to participate with the congregation, moving with the flow of everyone else.
It really shows a kind of dual aspect to his position. Sometimes he's distinct, performing these specific, almost intermediary rituals, and other times he's joining the community in their worship and movement.
And the grain offerings during these festivals, they follow a similar pattern to the new moon, right? The amounts.
Yes. Generally for festival offerings, the grain offering is an ephah with a bull, an ephah with a ram. And then with the lambs, again, it's as much as one pleases, plus the standard hin of oil for each ephah.
So that discretionary amount for the lamb's grain offering pops up again. It's there for the prince's new moon offering and also for these general festival offerings involving lambs.
Correct. It seems to be a standard practice for lamb grain offerings in these larger scheduled events.
What if the prince wants to bring an offering outside of these set times? Like a spontaneous gift, a free will offering?
The text actually anticipates that scenario. If the prince decides to bring a free will offering to the Lord, could be a burnt offering or fellowship offerings, that Eastgate, the one normally shut on working days, is open specifically for him to do this.
Just for his personal, unscheduled offering?
Yes. And the procedure is described as being exactly the same as his ritual on the Sabbath day.
So he goes through the portico, stands by the post, worships at the threshold, the offerings are made, the whole routine.
Precisely. He performs his ritual, presents his offering, and then he goes out. But, and this is another key distinction for that gate, the text says explicitly that after he has gone out from this free will offering, the gate is shut immediately.
Right. Unlike the Sabbath or new moon when it stays open, that really underlines the controlled access, doesn't it? And the gate's role as something opened for a specific purpose, not just general use outside the scheduled holy days.
It demonstrates that even, spontaneous worship by the highest human figure in this vision is accommodated, but it's still strictly within the established rules that govern access to the sacred space.
Beyond these special days and the prince's specific rituals, is there a constant daily rhythm of sacrifice described? Something happening all the time?
Yes, absolutely. The text mandates a daily burnt offering, and it's performed every morning.
Okay, what does that consist of?
It's a year-old lamb, without defect, offered as a burnt offering to the Lord, morning by morning, without fail.
A specific age, condition, and timing. Consistent. And like the others, does it have a grain offering?
Yes, there's an accompanying grain offering given morning by morning as well. It's a sixth of an ephah of flour, and it's moistened with a third of a hin of oil.
Smaller amounts of grain and oil than the big festival offerings, clearly scaled for this daily single lamb sacrifice.
Exactly. And importantly, this daily offering, the lamb, the grain, the oil, every morning is called a lasting ordinance.
Lasting ordinance.
In this vision is foundational. It's meant to be a permanent part of the temple's daily rhythm.
That daily rhythm provides a kind of constant backdrop to all the special day rituals we've been talking about. Okay, let's shift gears slightly.
Okay.
The chapter also lays out rules about the prince's inheritance and property. This seems less about worship directly and more about civil structure, but maybe it connects to his role and his ability to provide all these offerings.
Oh, it absolutely connects. It defines his responsibilities and, crucially, his limitations regarding wealth and land. This directly impacts his ability to sustain his position, his family, without exploiting the people.
Right. So what are the rules if the prince gives a gift from his inheritance, say to one of his sons?
If he gives a gift from his inheritance to one of his sons, that gift belongs to the son and his descendants. It becomes their property permanently, by inheritance. It stays within the direct princely line.
Okay, makes sense. But what if he gives a gift from his inheritance to a servant?
That's different. A gift to a servant is not permanent. The servant can keep it only until the year of freedom, which likely refers to the Jubilee year or some similar time of release and property restoration.
Ah, I see.
Then the property reverts back to the prince. It goes back to the estate.
So inheritance for sons is permanent, but gifts to servants are temporary. They eventually return to the princely estate.
The principle is stated pretty clearly. His inheritance belongs properly to his sons only.
And there's a very important restriction placed on the prince regarding the people's land, isn't there?
Yes, and this is crucial for the justice and the stability of the whole community envisioned here. The prince is explicitly forbidden from taking any of the inheritance of the people. He can't seize their land or drive them off their property.
So he can't use his position, his power, to just grab land from ordinary people.
Correct. And to make sure he doesn't need to do that to provide for his own family, the text states he must give his sons their inheritance out of his own property.
His own resources.
Exactly. The reason given is so that none of the people are separated from their property.
That rule feels like a really strong protection for the people's right to their land. It puts a clear boundary on the prince's authority and ensures he provides for his family from his own designated resources, not by diminishing the people's livelihood.
It safeguards the inheritance structure for everyone, really, and prevents the, potential abuse of power, the accumulation of land by the prince at the expense of the general population.
Okay, let's look back to the physical space of the temple itself. The chapter also describes specific areas dedicated just to preparing the sacrifices.
Yes. The figure guiding Ezekiel in the vision shows him these sacred rooms designated for the priests. They're located at the side of the gate, facing north, and there's a specific area noted at the western end of these rooms.
And what happens in these particular rooms?
This is where the priests are supposed to cook certain types of offerings, specifically the guilt offering and the sin offering, and also where they bake the grain offering.
Okay, so certain sacrifices, especially those dealing with atonement, impurity, things like that, are prepared by the priests in this designated sacred area. And there's a reason given for why they have to do it there, right?
Yes, and it gives us a fascinating insight into the concept of different levels of holiness in this vision. The reason given is to avoid bringing them into the outer court and consecrating the people.
Avoiding consecrating the people. That's a powerful phrase. What does that imply? About the difference between these inner sacred rooms and the outer court, or maybe the nature of the sacrifices being cooked there.
It suggests a really high degree of holiness associated with the preparation of these particular offerings, sin, guilt, maybe even some grain offerings. These sacrifices, having dealt with sacred matters or being dedicated in a special way, carry a kind of holiness that needs to be contained, managed,
Okay.
bringing them, once prepared, out into the outer court where the general population is milling about. Well, it could inadvertently impart a level of holiness to the people that isn't appropriate for their space or their role in the system.
Right.
It highlights this carefully managed interaction between different degrees or zones of sanctity.
That adds another layer to understanding just how structured this whole vision is. Holiness itself is managed, compartmentalized. So the priests have their specific cooking area for these particular offerings. What about the sacrifices brought by the general population? Are they cooked there too?
No, the text describes different areas for the sacrifices offered by the people. Ezekiel is shown 4 enclosed courts, located in the 4 corners of the outer court.
4 distinct spaces within the outer area. Does it say how big they are?
Yes, each one is 40 cubits long and 30 cubits wide. And it notes they are all exactly the same size, uniform.
Uniform kitchens in each corner. What are they like structurally?
Around the inside of each of these 4 courts, there's described a ledge of stone. And underneath this ledge, built all around, are places for fire, hearths, essentially.
So a stone structure with built-in cooking areas. And their function is?
Their function is stated very clearly. These are the kitchens where those who minister at the temple, which seems to be a group distinct from the priests handling the sin offerings, will cook the sacrifices of the people.
This reinforces that division we saw earlier, doesn't it? Priests handle specific, highly sacred offerings in an inner, more restricted space to manage that intense holiness, while other ministers handle the sacrifices brought by the general population in these designated cooking areas out in the outer court.
Exactly.
It just underscores the incredibly careful, detailed planning of function and space, right down to preparing the food for sacrifice.
It really paints a picture of a meticulously organized system. Every action, every location, every role seems to have a specific purpose within this grand structure of worship and community life.
Wow. So this journey through Ezekiel 46, it's revealed an astonishingly detailed blueprint for a sacred system, hasn't it?
Yeah.
We've looked at the intricate rules for temple access, that special east gate, the distinct rituals and offerings of the prince, how they vary by occasion, the steady rhythm of the daily sacrifice, the unique entry and exit rules for the people during festivals, those protective boundaries around the prince's inheritance, and even, as you just said, the specific locations and reasons for different cooking areas for priests versus ministers.
It's truly a vision built on order, on precision, and on a very defined hierarchy. Hierarchy of access, of responsibility, even of holiness itself within the structure and the community.
The level of specificity, it isn't just descriptive, is it? It feels regulatory. It prescribes exactly how things should function in this envisioned sacred space. So thinking about all this, what does this incredibly detailed blueprint, the access, the offerings, the inheritance rules, the dedicated spaces, what does it ultimately reveal about the relationship envisioned here between the divine, the designated leader, the prince, the ministers, and the people?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It really forces us to consider what these rules imply about purity, about order, about the necessity of specific roles, and maybe about the nature of worship itself within a system where the divine presence is understood to be absolutely central. These aren't just arbitrary rules. They seem meticulously designed to maintain the sanctity of that relationship between the community and the divine, all within this highly structured, carefully managed environment.